Hi everyone, this is Jody Kochi. I'm an instructor for the K-12 reading program and the Masters in Literacy Education and Special Education at St. Mary's University of Minnesota. And I'd like to do a quick tutorial on finding oral reading accuracy using the Qualitative Reading Inventory 6th edition. You will find other tutorials that I've done on finding comprehension levels and also fluency. So this tutorial will deal pretty exclusively with oral accuracy levels. There are a few things that you're going to need, and these are available on Blackboard in your class, and you can ask your instructor specifically where to find them. There's the QRI student example number 1, and I would recommend printing it in color. There's the QRI administration directions, and then what I call the QRI level cheat sheet, and it basically is just a quick and dirty way of looking at the different percentages for the accuracy levels. So when we start out, we're going to start using or administering the word lists. And the reason that we give the word lists is to actually find a starting point for administering the passages. Oftentimes we don't have a lot of knowledge about students that we're testing. This is a kind of a quick and easy way of finding a good starting point. We don't use the word lists scores for anything other than finding out where to start the passages. So you're going to start 2-3 grade levels below the student's grade placement. There's 2 different ways that they can get it right. If they automatically identify the word within 1 second, that's going to go into the automatically identified section, and I'll show you that in a moment. And they can also get it correct if it takes them longer than a second, but they still get it right. We want to test until we get to the student's highest independent level, which is 18 or more correct on a word list passage. Here's an example of the 2 word lists. One is the examiner's copy, which is the one on the left, and that's the one where you're going to be recording whether they get the word right or not. These are the 2 columns I was talking about as far as identified automatically or identified but took longer. And then this is the word list that matches this one. These are both available as, I actually copied these right out of the QRI 6 manual. So this you will hang on to, this you will show the student. I generally try to cover up the word lists that they're not reading currently. That's up to you and what you know about the student. So some information that we have on our student. This student is a 10th grader. His chronological age is 15 years, 9 months. And his teachers have told us that he has not met proficiency on any of the last several MCA reading exams. So we know that he's got struggles in reading. And his English teacher thinks that he's reading significantly below grade level based on the fact that he has trouble with any kind of reading tasks in his class. So the recommendations for the QRI word lists are to begin 2 to 3 grade levels below the student's grade placement. If the student is a 10th grader, where would you start the word lists? If you said 6th grade, you were right. There is a caveat to that, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So this examiner started at the 6th grade level, and you notice that the student, this is where you put whether they knew it automatically or they knew it but took longer. The total is all that counts. The student only got 8 out of 20 correct. No, if we have some knowledge of the student ahead of time and we know that they are significantly behind, it's okay to start at a lower level than the 2 to 3 grade levels. It really doesn't matter, and you probably don't want to start out frustrating the student this much. So you'll notice that the examiner actually tested back step by step, and probably if it were me, I would have looked at this 8 and said, oh my gosh, I'm going to jump back a few levels, maybe even 2nd or 3rd grade. Eventually, the student reaches an independent level right here and gets 19 out of 20 correct. That's at the 1st grade level. Notice it says begin IRI at the highest independent level. IRI simply means informal reading inventory, which is what the QRI is. And where would you begin the passage? Well, if you said the first grade level, then that's a really good guess. You are going to start by administering what they call concept questions. This is to just get an idea if the student is familiar with the topic of the passage. It's scored on a rubric and it's right on your recording sheet. They get a 3, 2, 1, or 0. When you administer the passage, you are going to need a timer. And you're going to need some sort of recorder like your phone or something where you can record their reading, because you're going to want to go back and check things. And you're going to need your copy of the passage so that you can mark deviations from print. After you've done that, you're going to ask the student the comprehension questions that go along with that passage. Students should not look back at the passage for the answers. This is kind of a memory thing. And you want to make sure that they are answering the questions based on the text, not based on their background knowledge. So explicit comprehension questions have to be based on the text or the picture. And implicit questions, you want to make sure that they use the text to make those inferences. If you have a feeling that they already knew that, you could probe and then say, can you tell me where in the text that helped you? Here's an example of the passages. The one on the left is the student passage. This is what you're actually going to give the student. This is one page of a several page passage, and you can just copy it right out of the book. The one on the right is St. Mary's actually has reformatted the examiner's passages kind of just to make them a little more user-friendly as far as being able to mark deviations from print. You can use these are available on Blackboard as well, or you can just copy them from the book. The stories are the same. I was talking about those concept questions. This first box right here is actually the questions, and I'm going to blow it up just a little here. So you can see you're going to ask these questions, record what they say, determine which level of the rubric it is, and then add them together, divide by 12, which is the total number of possible points. If they get 55% or above, it's considered a familiar passage. If it's lower than that, it's considered unfamiliar. That doesn't mean that we don't give it. It just means that, it's something to think about if they do poorly. Okay, so the student, the examiner actually gave the student a primer passage at first, and that might have been because they did so poorly going back that they wanted the student to feel successful. By the way, this word is primer. When you're talking paint, it's primer, but when you're talking reading, it's primer. So the student had 95% accuracy, which if you look, 95 falls into the instructional level. We're not using 4th grade or below because our kiddo is a 10th grader. So now we need to test either forwards or backwards. We have to do both. I usually test backwards first because it's a little bit easier for the student. And you'll notice that the student, when we went back one, also had an instructional level. It's not uncommon for struggling readers to have several instructional levels. And then all the way back to the pre-primer 2 is when they met their independent level. So we've got 2 instructional levels and an independent level. Are we done? No, we're not. We still need to find frustration. So now we need to test forward or test up. So this student, this is where we started at the primer level. These are where we tested back. And when we gave the 1st grade passage to the student, you'll notice that 94% accuracy is frustration. You'll also notice that this is considered an unfamiliar passage, so if you so decide, you could give another 1st grade passage and see if he does better if it's more familiar, but you don't have to. But we have now established all 3 levels. Here is the QRI cover sheet, and if I didn't mention it before, St. Mary's designed this. This is not anything that you would find in the QRI manual itself. It's just a really nice way of laying out all of your scores. I've covered up the things that we don't need to worry about right now. Right here is where our accuracy scores are, and what we need to do then is translate that into levels for independent, instructional, and frustration. So why don't you take a second and maybe pause the video and see if you can determine what the 3 levels are. Well, hopefully you matched mine. So what you're going to do is you're going to find 100% was pre-primer 2. That's going to go right here. And then primer goes instructional, and first grade goes frustration. So that is really what you do to fill in. You are going to notice that this examiner tested 2 additional levels, and you may be questioning, well, why? He was at frustration, so we know that anything harder is going to be more difficult. Well, the answer to that is right here. This is instructional. So even though he scored frustration at the oral reading piece, he was still able to answer the questions adequately to achieve an instructional level here. Since we have to find all 3 levels for comprehension as well, we have to keep testing up. Now, when you give the next passage, knowing that it's probably going to be difficult for them to read, my recommendation is just go ahead and do it the way you normally would. Ask the comprehension questions, and if you still need to go on, the next time I would just give them the passage, have them read it silently. You don't need to take a running record because you already have all the data you need on the student's struggles, and then ask the comprehension questions. I'm not going to go into any more depth right now about comprehension. That's for another tutorial. So here we could see all of our scores laid out that we have actually worked on. Here is our word lists, and remember we started at the 6th grade level because that's 2 to 3 levels below his grade placement. You can test back, but that's an awful lot of time and frustration for you and the student, so feel free to skip back a few levels if they do this poorly. This was going to be our starting point, but the examiner chose, which is totally fine, to start a level lower, tested backwards till we got independent, tested forward until we got frustration, filled all of this in, and then words per minute correct I'm going to address in another video. So this is what your completed oral accuracy sheet should look like. That's it for this right now. I hope you check out the other 2 tutorials on finding comprehension levels and also 2 ways to look at fluency using the QRI 6. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.